Awesome. All right. Hi, everyone. Sorry I can't be there in person. Just as a reminder, this meeting is recorded, and you guys got the agenda the other day and then the renderings or the test fits last night. Few follow-up items that are not on the agenda. One is just knowing that those test fits came in late yesterday. Let's walk through them today, and this is our opportunity to start asking questions. But if we need more time to digest these, certainly after today's meeting, let's look at potentially scheduling a second meeting with our partners here from LaValle Brensinger in the next few weeks to follow up. So just know that that option is on the table, that if we want to come back and revisit these after we've had some time to digest, that is on the table. I think the second thing, just so you guys know, is Kim, Bill, and I are meeting next Friday just to talk through potentially what future state of this committee might look like, if anything at all, and sort of where our role stops or maybe continues. So more to come there, but wanted you to know that there are conversations happening just around after these test fits, what's next, if anything, for us. There were no new questions submitted online. So what is online is, I think, what we reviewed in the last meeting, or you guys looked at the last meeting. And I think that's all the sort of housekeeping items, unless there is anything from Chief Cobb or anyone else in the room that I am forgetting.
I just want to share with the committee one thing. I did go up to the Lincoln, New Hampshire Police Department, which is currently being built. I met John up there, and I toured the building, which is in construction right now, with the Lincoln Police Chief and the Deputy Chief and their general contractor. So it was a really good way for me to see something kind of in person and just have an idea of spatially what it all looks like. I think the program would be fairly similar to one that we might look to do. So it was a really helpful exercise for me to head up north to Lincoln PD. So that was a great opportunity. So thank you to LBA for providing.
Awesome. That's great. All right, why don't we jump in? I think that we will probably spend the full hour looking over these two test fits. In the event that we do, these, if they're not already up on the website, these test fits will be up on the website for our community members. I'm assuming we have some folks in the room today, but they will be up on the website if they aren't already, for the community members to look at as well. There's a chance we might not get to public comment today. If we don't, obviously you guys know to submit those questions via the email address. Reach out to Kim, reach out to Chief Cobb, reach out to me. Hopefully we'll have some time, but in the event that we don't, you'll be able to review them as well and submit questions later. So I think with that, actually, before we start, I do have one question for LaValle Brensinger. And is Tony with us too?
Yes.
Cool. Okay. And for Tony, that, for me, when I was looking through these late last night, I had a question, and I think that it might be a good one to ask as we sort of set the stage walking into the conversation here is, are we looking at these test fits as a package deal of 1 story at 0 Newport Road, 2 story on Main Street, or are we looking at the 1 story, 2 story build options independent of the land that they are on?
So Tony here, Ashley. Right now you're looking at them on their prospective site.
Okay.
And what that will allow us to do is the building fits the site.
Okay.
And so if there was a preference operationally for 1 story or 2 story, that's not to say that you couldn't put a 2 story on the Newport Road site.
Yep.
It would be a bit more difficult to put a 1 story on the Main Street site, just given the slope and the contours that are there, the boundary lines that are there, how that would fit without really filling a giant hill to accommodate that.
Okay.
So those 2 sites lend themselves to different style of building, which is more what we'll hear about.
Yeah, we'll talk about that when we show the options.
Wonderful. Okay, that's super helpful. I think as we go into these, just for the committee to have an understanding of how we're evaluating them. And then just one other note that the Main Street property, we know is privately owned. There has been a loose conversation in passing with the owners, and they have indicated that they would potentially be open to selling. So as we're talking about that property, I want you all to know that there has been some sort of conversation with the owners that even in passing that there might be some interest there in selling. Okay, why don't I hand it over to our folks, our partners at La Valley Brensinger, and I'll let you guys decide if you want to start with the Newport Road or Main Street option.
Great, Ashley, Tony here. Before we jump into the plans, I just wanted to go over a couple of things that we're hoping to take away from today's conversation. And you're absolutely right. This is new and fresh. It's a conversation. These drawings start that conversation. We want to hear the pros and cons from everybody involved. What do you like? What do you dislike? What are the questions you have? Knowing that you haven't had a lot of time to absorb it, we certainly have the meeting coming up for the third Friday of this month. What I would like to take away at the end of today, if not today, certainly at our later meeting this month, what do we need for October? What do we need for handouts for October meeting? When does it need to be issued ahead of time so that folks aren't getting it the last minute? I've got a lot of work to do on both of these test sites, knowing that they're going to go through a little bit of revision and some discussion today. But from my standpoint, taking this information out, taking the program with La Valley, taking all of that information and packaging it for an October fall town meeting or whatever we term that, it has some work, so I could really use some help in setting those deliverables and deadlines.
Perfect.
Wow.
Thank you, Tony.
Yeah, here, I'll load the drawing up. So John's gonna go through them, a couple of things as we look at these. So, we're gonna go through the Newport site first. That could be a two-story building if you wanted to, but as John will talk about, in a two-story, it adds square footage. You have to have 2 stairs, an elevator, etc. The block planning that we've done are based on the space program. And John's going to talk about the approach to how the building's layered security-wise operationally, but it's done in keeping with many other similar layouts that we've done for other departments and other municipalities for similar sized buildings. So operationally, how the building is proposed to work is according to good policing approach. As Tony mentioned, and John will talk about in detail, the Main Street site really doesn't lend itself well to a 1-story building. It really, because of 28-foot drop from front to back, it really wants to be, a 2-story building. The next step for us would be, we're gonna have a recommendation for you today that John's gonna go over as to what we believe is the better of the 2 options, sites. But the next step for us is to do a space plan that would show the actual spaces within each block of color. The color blocks are program blocks based on the approved space program, right? And do a more finished exterior approach to the building for your October meeting and for sharing it with the community here in town. Once we go through these options, you might have a direction, even though we just received these. I think once we go through them, you might have a better idea. John, take it away.
Thanks, Bob. So we're gonna look at the Newport site. Both sites, Newport and Main Street, have pros and cons with them. We'd like to try to highlight those as we go through, but looking at Newport, basically the front, basically parallel with Newport, there's a 25-foot setback. There's also a easement for utility lines. So again, that's a visual right off the bat, but we can easily work around those. This site is large enough that we have flexibility to push the building back or the whole project back far enough to kind of give a buffer from that easement, so that it's like you guys aren't running on top of the lines. So what we did was we set the building back about, I think it was almost 75 feet off the road. which is basically perfect policing. It gives us that security buffer from the main road. It avoids any sort of traffic getting close to the building, stuff like that, so. But on Newport, it's a 1-story. We could easily do a 2-story, but we highly recommend 1-story because it's better design. This layout is basically exactly what we talked about in our last meeting. So we did a 1-story, 2-story option. We took that 1-story and we integrated it to the site and adjusted it accordingly to the site. There's really not a lot to work around. This site is relatively flat, which is easy to build on. There is no wetlands that we're aware of as of now, except for in the front, and we're going to avoid those anyways with easements and setbacks. So we can accommodate 30 visitor parking spots. We can accommodate all of the parking in the back for secure parking. We currently are showing 2 means of egress. The one on the left would be the primary exit and entrance to the police. The secondary would be going through the visitor parking lot. So the last thing we want to do is share a driveway for police or visitors, but it would be a secondary. So again, it's the main one blocked. You guys have a second means to get out of the we are also providing a optional driveway to Hilltop, which I believe was a private road. We have to get approval from the landowner, but it's an optional driveway that gives you that second means for strictly police, and then you're not interacting with visitors. We are accommodating solar panels for now. That's basically kind of a benchmark of where it could be, how much we have. We do understand solar is important to the town, so we've oriented the building properly to do future solar if you guys want to. Other than that, the one other thing that I want to point out with this site is that you can see that we pushed the property to the left lower corner, which allows future growth to the back and to the front if the town deems that they want to do something on that property, because there's plenty of land there. We didn't want to put this right in the middle of the property so that you can't do too much. So there's plenty of other land there that could be some town buildings if that was decided on.
The only other thing is we do show up to 6 covered parking spaces, which programmatically was something that was mentioned in the program, right? And the other thing we did is, to your point, John, is we want to stay away from Hilltop as well, because we wanted to have a clear driveway, and Newport's I believe a state road, and so yeah, it is a very good site. I don't know if you want to read the 3 points, John. You basically you kind of already covered it, so yeah.
Newport is a state road, so we are limited on the amount of curb cuts that we can do. We are doing 2, which I don't think is going to be an issue. Plus, they're far enough away from each other that it wouldn't be an issue. So typically, it's like 50 feet or more. I forget what it's 50 to 80 feet, something like that, that they need to be separated from each other.
Yeah.
So we can't have them on top. We don't want to do a third because I think that might be challenging. State
one for sure.
So that we can get that private, entrance. So this is really what we came down with: two new entrances to the property, and then a potential third to Hilltop.
Yeah, and just as we move to the block plan, John will walk us through the operational adjacencies and how the building would function. We definitely could do a 2-story option here, but you're adding a square footage, and there's enough property to build a 1-story. So it's something we could talk about after we're finished presenting. All right.
I don't know if you want to continue. If anyone has any questions, we pull the questions after.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, but before we move on to the block diagram, I want to take a moment and see if anybody has any questions on this slide.
Susan, send your mic.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Could you tell us again, On the total acreage here,
I believe this was 7 acres.
7 acres.
Yep.
So what does this layout include, that 7?
Last.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
So in the future, it would be probably 4.5 or 5. Right. Okay, thank you.
The other thing that's notable about this site, but that's true actually on the Main Street site too, is that it gives us the setbacks John talked about where we're not putting visitors up against the building. There's a security setback, which we want to be at least 50 feet, ideally more. There's clear separation of public versus police, staff and cruiser parking. There's 2 means of egress, all things you talked about. The other site does that too. We'll go through it, so.
some of the benefits to this site as well as there's future growth, like we work with other towns that do like, gun ranges and things like that for the future. So again, we don't need to plan them now, but you do have the option to do it. Again. Oh, no. But again, there's those opportunities for training on site instead of off site.
You can do anything with that site. You could put a playground there. You can do whatever you want. There's plenty of land.
Phil, you got a question?
What is the preferred orientation for solar panels? Is it directly south or is it something?
So you want to have a roof surface south, yes.
So this looks like it's more southeast-ish.
We didn't, again, this is just a simple, we don't have it angled exactly to the optimal unangles and stuff like that. We basically have a perpendicular. But as we develop the project, we would take those into consideration.
Is there any recommendation for a recommended distance from the power line to easement for a building to be? So I know you said we can push this back a little bit further. Like, I wouldn't want it as close as possible to
Yeah,
easement.
and that's not our intention either. We have a buffer. I don't know if there is a specific setback from the easement, because again, the easement is the setback. So the power lines are not right on the edge of the easement. They're probably somewhat in the middle between the easement line and the property line. So the building would not be on top of it. And that would be the last thing that we want to do as well, just visually and,
I was just gonna say for both of these sites, so is once we get past today, especially if we come out with a front runner, we're gonna have our civil engineers give it a look at it. Right now, what we used for doing these was the original, what is we call these, a site limitations plan, John, that they did with a power line to setback. And then we'll have VHB have a final look at that after today, once we know where we're going, so. But the building's pretty far away, it's not.
we have room to push it back a little
Yeah.
more. Again, like Bob says, is we're gonna.
My next question is, as far as the access to and from Newport Road, you have 2 driveways, one for police and one for public. And I assume 2 means of egress is recommended.
Yep.
That's a minimum of 2, yes.
Then my question would be, is there any thought to having one single driveway and having it wide to the left and then to the right? Because I can envision somebody pulling in the lease only driveway, seeing a sign and getting confused, possibly backing out onto Newport Road.
We do signage and stuff
Yeah.
like that. This would be like police entrance only. Not that that would probably stop some people,
Right.
but.
Every project do have the same conversation, but it would be signage. But the other thing is, you have to have minimum of 2 driveways and 2 access points because if one gets blocked for any reason. So sharing an entry point and then branching off would not be advisable.
Ideally, what would be nice is to bring the gate closer to the road,
Yeah.
but we want to keep that gate towards the security fence.
That's a detail. To be honest with you, that's a real detail.
Yeah.
But you run into that all the time. Even with gates, people still will pull in. It's, yeah.
Yeah, I actually share that concern as well, especially I think if I am looking at this correctly, we are probably right at the crest of Newport Road where the post office is, and I do worry about folks potentially trying to back out on that crest of Main Street, but I think the point is noted and we can certainly revisit.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's a real detail at this point. I
Yep.
think it's the siting of the building, the fact that you can build it, you can put the parking, you can put the setback, you can have two distinctive driveways in and out. Those are the key things. You know, the things you guys are bringing up are great points, but they're really details for the future. But all great points for sure.
Are there state requirements for either site regarding, like in front of the fire department now, stoplights? A way of changing traffic flows in case you.
Yeah, signaling for PD is not something that's generally done. If this is a fire station, yes. But to put signals in, very expensive. We're dealing with that in another municipality in New Hampshire, and I can't remember, John, how much it was, but it was several $100,000. But we don't recommend it for policing. The chief can speak to
There's
that.
no requirement.
There's no requirement, yeah.
The lights would be the vehicles. Hopefully everyone's gonna stop and let them go.
You want us to move to the,
Yeah,
Other questions?
I think we're good to move. Perfect.
So we're gonna look at the plan, not much different from what we talked about last time. We did some minor modifications, per the chief's request. The only change on this one was we switched dispatch records so that administration could be closer to records, but other than that, all of the adjacencies are exactly the same as last time. You can see that we have a secure line that basically separates visitors and PD. So that again, the visitors can use that public space on a as needed basis. And then, we can shut the back of the building off so that we don't allow anyone that's not supposed to be back there. So I don't know if we need to go into depth with this unless anyone has any specific questions.
I think my only question is, in this scenario, are we sort of mimicking the use of the dispatch and command center now, where they would be the first, the first greeters for any visitors?
Yeah, so typically what we do is we set up records and dispatch to have a service window.
Got it.
Just in case dispatch is on a break or busy, then records could take over for any sort of visitor. So
Great. So
yeah,
someone would be staffed in that records space?
That's the idea.
the chief will know.
Yes, that was an important point. I'm glad you brought that up actually, is that if somebody just needs to come in, right, exactly, right there, where they need to just pick up their accident report, they're gonna have someone, the administrative assistant, able to respond to that window and help them out with that instead of asking dispatch for it.
Great.
And I've seen that in a lot of agencies that I visited, dual windows, one for records and one for the dispatch.
Like, because the chief said, sorry.
It's, yes, and as Tony just pointed out, it's really during business hours,
Right.
so as the administrative is working or not, typically Monday through Friday, 8 to 4, that's when that records window will be open.
Got it. Thank you.
Is this seen as sort of a hard corridor with a bunch of doors, this kind of a building? Or is this more of a bubble diagram where some of these spaces are open to the yellow corridor and some obviously are enclosed?
There will be nothing open to the corridor. So what we try to do is create a spine to minimize circulation. And then we can maximize the program space. We find this to work great on a one-story building. It does lend opportunity to, doors are going to be off those corridors, but we can also have glass off it as well to let some natural light in from the outside. So again, we take all the opportunity to apply those rules.
Yeah, I would just say that when you go to the public areas, I don't know if you can see the mouse when I move, it's a very small mouse. That area, the public area, there's a modest lobby, and then there's a common space, which is the community room, training space, and there's a public toilet there. All the program pieces that go with that common space. So that area publicly accessed would be the lobby, the vestibule, but the walls from the lobby into dispatch and into records would be would be projectile resistant. It would be hardened wall, so you couldn't tell. It would look like any other wall, like the wall behind me, but it would be resistant to basically gunfire, basically level 5 or level 3, whatever we decide. The areas behind dotted red line, that's the area that's the security area. Public cannot go beyond that dotted red line without being escorted by somebody from the police department or being an actual employee of the police department. But we will actually, some of these are suites, so they're self-contained. Others may be more open, as John said, but the next step would be do that final space plan, and that would show that. Right now, administration, everything that's admin is in that blue block. Everything, all the program spaces, right, John? So
yeah. To add to it, so each block has a security feature to it. We do not want them to be open to the quarter at any time because of security reasons. But what we do is we do take the opportunity to make it an open concept within each box. And the chief can kind of speak on what we've done on Lincoln. Is that, like, within the administrations, we around the perimeter, we do the hard, private offices, but within the center, it's an open concept so that it's not like it feels bigger than what it is. And we try to apply that design to each one of them so that, it feels.
Yeah, same in detectives investigations, but again, we're not there yet. We're looking ideally, maybe even today, but hopefully next week, rather than waiting 2 weeks from now, to come up with, one of these options that is preferable. We'll go through both of them, obviously, and then the next step is to do that space plan and do something that looks less of a box on the outside. So, keep going, John. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the next exercise is walls, doors, windows, getting into
The space plan.
So this is where we start, and it's basically.
You want to keep talking about I'm just scrolling down for you. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not looking at the questions. I'm sorry.
What I don't see, I know we've talked about the Sally Port and the issue we have now with storage in the Sally Port, and ideally we don't want that. Don't see a designated area for storage. I don't know if it's incorporated in one of the bubbles.
It's in there.
This site, would it make sense to consider a separate building, a separate garage structure, maybe over to the left of the covered PD parking that can be used for cold storage?
So within the space program, we've accommodated for storage. So the last thing we want to do is get you into the same situation as what you are now. The Sally Port will only house vehicles and bring detainees. That's it. There'll be nothing else in there.
The answer, the storage is built into the diagram. If you want later to build, we generally try to avoid doing a lot of outbuildings in the beginning, because that's what happens when your building's not big enough, and then all of a sudden you got to go somewhere and buy a shed and put it in the back. So ideally, you like to avoid structures like that, but that storage is built into the block.
Yeah. So within the space program, we accommodated maintenance, whatever it is, it's already built into it.
You want to go through us that
I think if
diagram?
we can just add to
Sure.
that, the block that's shown as 2-bay Sally Port, typically those Sally Port areas are fenced off within the larger block, so that when you're dealing with a detainee, somebody's in that Sally Port area, they don't have access to cleaning solvents and tires and things that are now currently within your Sally Port area that make that a dangerous situation. So while it's not shown as a wall right now, those areas are secure within the secure area again.
Yeah. The Sally Port's just a Sally Port. It's not storage of vehicle stuff or anything else. So
You got a question?
Which one of these blocks includes the soft interview room?
it's in the front with the common space areas.
We have interview rooms kind of scattered throughout. So there's an interview room in booking. There's an interview room up in the common space.
Yeah.
I think we even have an interview room in the investigation. So there's an interview room kind of scattered throughout and
Yeah.
we can. And that was, we worked with the chief on where those should be.
Yeah. And again, when we do the space plan, we'll show those, but.
Yep.
Yeah. Space needs assessment, whatever page administration is on. And that will have chief's office, lieutenant's office, admin assistant, all of those things are incorporated into this color block.
To that blue block, that's correct.
Yeah.
And the blocks are correct sized in the diagram, so. Do you wanna, John, do you wanna talk a little bit about the progression to the back or anything at the back regarding auto impound where the radio generator, everything's, within the, I don't know what do you wanna talk about anything else?
We kind of, again, so the red dash lines in the back are representative security fence, which basically is gonna secure auto impound, the generator, the radio antenna. So if you take your location right now, all of that stuff, the back would be all fenced in. So that no one can get to the radio antenna, to the generator, the vehicles are separated. That's basically where we got a space for everything within this property.
Do you want to go to the 3D?
You can go to the image. Okay. So what we've done right now is just did a simple massing, just to kind of give you an idea of what the building could look like. Our thought is obviously trying to tie it into the community so that, it blends in, that, the materials and finishes, we can get into that as we progress, but I'm thinking that this could be a, clapboard type siding with some stone or something to kind of tie it into the community. We find that a gable roof is a perfect situation for tying into the community as well. This could be simply a flat roof box, which then says commercial all over it. But we feel this lends opportunity for additional space in the attic where we can take opportunity for utilities. It provides a space for solar panels on the roof. And I'm not sure if I got anything else, Bob. You want to add anything?
No, I think this is just the first go at it. Again, the next step, I feel like I've repeated that too many times, and if I did, I'm sorry, is if the next step for us, especially if we come up with one particular site and option, would be develop this a little bit further and give something more about the character of the building in a very conceptual manner. But it would be obviously contextual to the town, and even though on this stretch, it's a little bit of a highway with I believe a grocery store and a post office and other things going on there, we do something that would be contextual and scaled nicely so that it's not, fancy, but it's gonna look nice and it would fit into the community, so.
Before we move on to Main Street, I want to make sure that, if we open it up for any additional questions. I do have questions around the power lines. I believe on Newport Road there, the power lines are, those poles and the lines are run right up against the street and they're sort of low. Would we try to bury those? Would they stay that way? And then also on the power lines, is there any issue with the large antenna being close to power lines?
The antenna is actually not that close. It's at the back of the property.
Okay.
It's all the way at the back where my mouse is. Let me see if I blow this up. I don't think that's an issue, to be honest with you at all. But
Okay.
as far as the power lines, if we were doing fire trucks with 14-foot plus clearances, maybe, but you're not taking anything. As long as those power lines are high enough that a fire truck servicing this building would be okay with the clearance, I don't think it's an issue. But again, that's kind of minutia of the future. I think, Tony, you guys are doing a budget for this. We will have our civil engineers give a look at both of these options. We just waited for today to do that until today, after today, and get any other information, right, John, that they may want to pitch in on the sites.
We visited the site last time we were here. We didn't see any issues with the power lines for any sort of access for emergency vehicles.
Okay.
So I guess I would recommend to kind of keep them as it is, because that would be quite a cost to rework. I would rather take that money and spend it on the building and the property itself.
Yep. Thank you. Are there any other questions from the committee on this building and location before we move on?
Chief, I have a question for you, and that is, response time. Georgia just happening this week, it's never gonna end. Getting up to this facility, the elementary school, from that location, are you comfortable with being able to do it fast enough?
First, the police officers aren't typically at the station when calls come in. They could be checking a house out on King Hill Road, the very end of King Hill Road, at the same time some sort of active incident were to come in. So we are ready and able to respond from anywhere we would be located. And primarily the patrol officers are not in the station to be able to respond.
Tony, you're gonna run off and start pricing this stuff. What kind of construction are you talking about for this building?
So, sorry, it's a collaborative effort, understanding, as Bob just described, the contextual scale of this building. We'll look at different options of roofing, siding, clapboard has many different options, right? You can get hardy plank, you can get cementitious, you can do wood shingles. It's about the backup and what's behind it. So in those hardened areas way in the rear of the building, that's going to be a lot of block construction in there. Does it get strapped out and furred with clapboard then over that to change the appearance? Roof shingles versus metal roofing. All of those items will be addressed in putting together the estimates so that you have the available options to you to say, okay, what are some of the assumptions and the exclusions? And so I may start with the assumption that it's an architectural grade shingle, it's 30-year life versus a metal roof, right? And so you can pick and choose kind of those menus even at this early stage.
So Tony, it might be helpful.
More asking about, sorry, I was more asking about the actual construction. Are you looking at a block building with wood roof? Are you looking at non-combustible throughout? Are you looking at a steel building with a couple of block rooms?
Generally non-combustible, but the way police stations are set up, and Bob, if you can go to the floor plan.
Yeah, I was gonna say it might be
You
helpful.
basically got two different code use groups here. We've got the front, which is public. It might be more
Excuse me.
assembly use, and then you've got the institution. So those are gonna have different construction methodologies. When I look at this building, the roof line lends itself to swinging trusses up there and doing a wood truss. It's single story. I don't see a lot of steel frame. We're not having slab on, well, we'd have slab on grade. There's no need to dig out a basement space, right? And pay for that excavation. So those are the types of things that we'll be working through.
So Tony, it might be helpful to have John take 2 minutes and talk about Lincoln. Is a very similar building that's almost done. It's about 2 months for being completed. And John can talk about how that's constructed. We'll work, but to Tony's point, John, I will work with Tony on coming up with a base of design of some kind. But John, do you want to share some of that, please? Excuse me.
So this building is it's right around 14,000 square feet. So take it go either metal studs or wood framing. And we'll work with Tony on which price is better. Lincoln, we actually built it with wood studs and pre-engineered wood trusses, which we found to work the best. We can get clear spans. We can minimize steel. What we try to do is focus our trades into one location instead of mixing them. In the back, we obviously have security for booking and intake. Most of that stuff will be hard walls. We'll have block for all the cells, probably around some of the sally board. But after that, we start to switch to metal studs, and then we provide like a plywood for security. We don't want people to break in, and we don't want people to break out either. But we also want to make sure that we have a secure wall to basically accommodate that. So working with Tony, we're going to strategize on what the best material is for this project at the time, because it's all in timing. Metal studs could be cheaper now, and wood studs could be cheaper next month for all we know.
Yeah.
But general construction, I'm thinking wood stud framing, materials and all that stuff, that's where it fluctuates, where we could get into vinyl clapboard siding, which is probably the cheapest, and go all the way up to a cement, board from Hardy Plank. And same as what Tony said is architectural shingles would be basically a base start, and the top would be metal, stainless steel metal roof, which again has their pros and cons, but it comes with a dollar.
And Lincoln has a nice stone band on the bottom, which is a panelized man-made stone, but it adds a lot of character to the building. We would recommend that, I don't know if you can see the mouse, it's so tiny even on my screen, but the front of the building facing Newport, and then the side facing the public parking ideally, and maybe Tony, you guys would do an alternate number on that. We recommend doing ballistically rated windows there, but to the back and so forth, not, because ballistic windows are, higher windows, but also ballistically rated, because the ballistic windows are we just priced them out recently, 8 to 10 times more per window than a regular window. So, high quality window.
There's ways we can spiral glass windows that provides ballistic, level to it. So again, it's all on the level of security that we want to provide. But we have options to get into a certain.
Yeah, and I think that's a decision made along the way. I'm Tony, I'm sure you guys would take some of these into account, maybe as alternates, but that's a decision the town has to make. So we recommend, but it's up to you what you want to do. So,
what's the budget of the Lincoln? I'm just curious. Police station.
So that was budgeted about a year and a half ago. It was right around $6 million.
So to that, you'd probably add at least 9% or more in that year and a half. And for you folks, if you pass it in March, is that correct? And you actually you're looking at about 2.5 to 3 years of escalation on that, right, Tony? And at about 5.5 to 6% per year average. So that adds a little money to it. So, and the biggest thing too is the site cost. I mean, the buildings are the buildings, but the site costs vary greatly from project to project.
That was one of the benefits with Lincoln, is that they already owned their site, so they didn't have a site cost. So that was basically project only, that it didn't include site.
Yeah, the nice thing about that site is similar to this site, it's flat and it didn't have a lot of, it didn't have issues like wetlands and things of that nature. So we can go to the next one if you want, or more questions there. We good?
I think we're good.
Okay, I'm going to start with the site first. I don't want to shrink it more than this, because for those folks who are looking on screen, you can't read it, but walk me through it, John. I'll move it around, okay?
So one thing that I want you guys to remember is the pros and cons between each site. Is there's some challenges to each of them. One's a little more challenging than the other. Kind of big picture, if we were to start from Main Street and go all the way to the back of the property, like Bob says, there's a 28-foot grade drop, which is considerable. It challenges the parking at the driveways, the slopes. Retaining walls are probably definitely required in here to make anything work. But what we've done here is oriented the building to basically a 2-story option. We have the Sally Port, a lot of the police stuff, Sally Port property evidence, patrol, investigations are all on the lower level, so that they can have direct access to the back parking for PD.
I'm gonna stop for a second. So if you look here, again, my mouse is very small. You can see we put some benchmark elevations here. So I'm sorry, John, I just want to point out that we have them here at 1260 and so on. So keep going, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so on the lower level is, again, all of the police departments. On the top is where we're providing a lot of the visitors. So we have the common space, we have administration, we have the departmental support up there. So it's functions that are fine on the upper floor, and then it provides that proper separation. So in the front, right off Main Street, we have a parking lot for 27 visitor parking, which is separate from PD driveways, which is great. What we've done is this site has 3 roads, which is we don't typically have this option. So we have 2 exits, primarily for PD, which is a plus. And we're accommodating all of the parking in the back that's required for the department. Again, this is probably a challenging site just to slope. You know, windows on the lower level are probably going to be minimal because of the grade change, but we're going to try to, you know, take the opportunity to get natural light in there as much as possible within reason. Site does not lend any sort of future growth just because of the odd shape of it, the grading. So again, there is a little bit of space out back for potential training for PD, but again, it's a slope site. We are providing all of the amenities, so the radio tower, the auto impound, the generator, all of that stuff comes with it. Solar, we've already oriented the buildings, you know, to collect solar if that was an option as well. I think the big thing to take out of this one is just the slope site. If you look at the other site on how easier it is to construct this building to a slope site, it's like night and day.
Yeah, I think just looking at this public parking, we're waiting to present today. Again, before we share things with civil engineer, we were very aware of the slopes. That's how we show the benchmarks. But you notice that even from Main Street at 1269 as a benchmark, and then the building's maybe at 1260 or 1261, let's say. There's an 8-foot difference there. So how you move from the parking to the building, it has to be fully ADA accessible. We're going to look at that. One of these we're telling you is that we'll go through the rest of this option is that there's going to be definitely more cost to this option because you have, as you pointed out, John, we have 2 stairs and an elevator. That's about 1,200 square feet. You're going to have a series of retaining walls, some ramping, things of that nature on the outside of the building. And also requires more site work as well, potentially, like roadways and so forth. Because even in this situation, I think, John, we would not recommend having only one means in and out of the police parking. If something gets blocked and you can't get out in an emergency, that's a problem. So there's some challenges to the site, but let's go through the rest of it.
One other thing to point out is there is an existing sewer line that goes pretty much through
Yeah,
the middle
right
of
here.
the property,
Right there,
which would have to be relocated.
Yeah. right there.
So back to Ashley's comment on the power lines on Newport, we don't recommend modifying the power lines. So on this one, there's a lot of site restraints that would come with cost. I don't know what that cost is, but it's more than the other property. So that's something to kind of consider where you want to spend your money. I would prefer to spend it on the building and try to minimize site work as much as possible so that we can get the building that you guys want. Any questions on the site?
I have one question, and this is really just more of my own edification. I'm assuming it's fine. But we've got the radio antenna tower there, and TDS has theirs, 200 feet to the right. Is there any issue with having 2 towers of that size? Like, will they interact with each other? Are there any issues that would cause?
We would have to get a vendor involved just to make sure that that isn't a problem. So currently, right now, this is only a placeholder. That
Yep.
doesn't mean that the radio antenna can't be on the other side of the building, but once we start developing this property, we get a vendor like Ospey Mountain Electronics. They would tell us exactly where to put the antenna. That would be the next step.
Yeah, I mean, the radio towers will be on different frequencies, but John's right. They'd have to be researched and looked at in the next phase. 200 feet is, if they're on top of each other, it could be a problem. Also depends on the height and how far each one has to reach.
Yep.
So that it's kind of a complex answer, I guess.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee before we move on to the block diagram?
Yes, actually, the lady here. I have a couple of questions about, well, comments about, I feel like this is site work on this site is going to be a lot. I also feel like is there concern about the 10-foot setbacks on the Hayes Road side? And then my bigger question, the chief, is there any concern about the access point on Main Street? It's right across from PC's, it's right across from the elementary school, you're up on. You know,
It's very tight.
yeah,
Area.
that's both very busy area.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I would, I guess, the other location is busy as well, but at least it's a much wider road. But yeah, I do have some reservations about the means of ingress and egress for the visitor parking spaces, just due to the other factors on the other side of that road, the width of that road.
And then
One,
even,
one thing that we liked is that we were clearly separating visitors from PD. So visitors are only entering from Main Street to the parking lot, which again, should be a low volume of coming and going. And we have PD going to Parkside and Hayes, which again, they're side roads, then you're approaching Main Street, then you go to where you need to go.
And I think visitors too, is that generally you might have a couple a day. The only time you really need to really use that lot, and the reason it's sized the way it is in the program as well, is if you're using the community room for community training, like police night out or neighborhood safety training or something. So the traffic coming out of that public parking will not be heavy. If anything, it might be maybe more traffic after hours, rather than doing business day, so.
to go on. Moving
Yeah.
swiftly.
Moving swiftly, that's nice. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Hayes Road is small road, Parkside just has that weird kind of angle, so it's certainly a consideration.
Parking is tough to do. We all know it. We
Right.
always see it. So saying that it's gonna be a lightly used parking lot, you put 27 parking spaces anywhere on Main Street under the.
Across from PCs especially, right,
It is
restaurants.
gonna be used.
A good point.
Yeah. I mean, if you let people park there, that's fine, sure.
See, just thinking, it's just the opposite, if we cut that in half of those spots that are shown in the 27 lot, would you make that up just on public parking that's available on Main Street? And pull the whole thing forward? But what I'm hearing from you,
It doesn't exist.
27 isn't enough, and you're gonna need, to use what's on Main Street as much as possible.
Maybe you could charge for that and make some money so you can pay for the building. Just an idea. She'll move to the block.
I think so.
All right, well, John will walk us through. There is a note there you'll see about the added footage in the upper right corner. Go ahead, John. I'll blow up on each floor for you.
Yeah, so the two-story option from the last one that you saw is slightly different just because the site kind of tells us what we need to do. So starting on the lower level, we kind of strategically, pick the departments that we
Oh, I'm
felt.
sorry, you want to go lower level first?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to find this.
Please.
Can't find your.
So we strategically picked the departments that we felt would work on the lower level. We want to keep patrol and property evidence all together. Patrol, basically easy access to the back parking lot, booking and intake close to property evidence. So there's a lot of adjacencies that we need to keep in mind so that, obviously booking and intake can't be at the level, so that obviously have to be on the little. Property evidence needs to be adjacent to booking, so it kind of tells us where we can work. So. And we're basically providing direct access to the lot back. On the side, again, keep in mind, there's a slope on each side. We can use retaining walls this time. break some of that grade back so that we can get natural lighting. But towards the back of control, portion of it will be underground. The white highlighted area, the upper level is basically just foundation work that's going to be supported in the upper level. The back of the parking and all that stuff, most of that stuff stays the same between a 1-story and a 2-story. So I don't think we need to really get into that too much. Looking at the upper floor, so in the front, again, we provide the common space in the front so that visitors enter that, have access to records of dispatch and the training room. And then behind the training room is where we have the fitness and the agility room that would be adjacent to the department of support, which houses the lockers, break room and all that. So every department has a specific adjacency. So we don't want the officers walking through from the fitness down the corridor, down to the lockers. We try to keep those together so that we have that connection. Administration is kind of tucked in the back. A little different from the 1-story, but again, we're trying to compress this building to a certain square footage so that we stay within the realms of that space program that we worked out. The last thing we want to do is increase the building just to, you know, get a bump out or something like that. Security measures are similar to 1-story. The red dash line separates public from secure. So basically, the whole lower level is secure, no visitor access at all. And then administration support and investigations is secure.
Yeah, the nice thing about this option, well, I mean, in the 1-story, administration's a lot more or less, but is if I'm a visitor to this 2-story building and I want to talk to a detective in investigations, or I want to come speak to the chief or the lieutenant or somebody, it's pretty close to the lobby, pretty close to public entrance. And it is that same way in the 1-story option as well. You don't want to have to parade somebody through the whole police station all the way back to detention to speak to the chief or somebody.
The square footage on this particular option is right around 15.8. So if you remember what our space program is like, it was at 14.2. That didn't include stairs, elevators, and additional circulation. So keep in mind that there's a 1,000 to 1,200 delta between 1-story to 2-story. And then that's where the additional cost comes involved for 2-story options.
And that would be the same on the 1-story option you said earlier, whether it's here or somewhere else, it's the same for me. So,
yeah. Again, anytime we can do a 1-story, that's the option.
John, in consideration of this, if we're still considering this site, could you include the 80 feet of ADA ramp that's going to take to get from the visitor parking down to the main door? Right now, you just have a little simple sidewalk.
Yeah.
But it's going to require 80 feet of ramp for switchbacks.
There's a lot of site stuff that is going to be challenging. That stuff that would be, again, those are the things that we want to kind of think of now and determine if this property is even worth moving forward to figure out how many ramps we need. Because there's a lot of great change.
Yeah, I mentioned at the site, if you remember a few minutes ago, I mentioned that between the public parking and the entrance of the building, it could be a 7.5 to 8.5 foot difference roughly. So you're right. We don't show that right now. We'll definitely could show that in the next iteration if you really want to consider this, because we're going to have a civil look at it as well. And they're going to mark up a lot of areas where we need retaining walls. We also have to double check slopes on the access drives to make sure that I mean, these are for regular vehicles, not fire trucks. Those have real limitations because of axle length, but we don't have that here. So, but we didn't want to do all that if we looked at this option and folks decided that it's not, but maybe worth pursuing, or it is. You're right, though. Yes.
One thing that we don't want to do is waste time and money on a site that's not going to be possible or it's going to be too expensive. We want to try to be as honest with you as possible to help you make the right decisions. This particular site, again, grading, ramps, retaining walls, are a challenge for this particular site. The odd size is a little challenging as well, but we can easily fit the project onto this property, but right off the bat, you're opening a wall, just site.
I think for the sake of selling this to the town, having things included like 80 feet of handicap ramp is gonna be an important aspect.
Yep.
And to show why this site was turned down, that's gonna be
Yep.
a kind of important factor, along with retaining walls and all those other things.
Yep.
We didn't get into that level because we wanted to really have a conversation with you just to see, do you guys want to continue with this site or not? If you do, great, then we can go to the next step and get our civil engineer and start talking about the site requirements. Because that's gonna obviously help Tony provide a cost for that.
Say, what's the difference between the cost of the two sites? I don't have it, I know it's somewhere, I just don't have it.
Generally, a rule of thumb, depending on, like, you could talk about $1 million for a simple site.
No, as far as both sites are gonna have purchase.
Okay.
And
That's
cost of the
I've got a question for, oh, sorry. Is there someone else in the room?
I don't think we have those exact numbers yet, and that was gonna be one question I offered to the committee, is at what point do we start to have conversations with either or one of these property owners, the board or Kim, to start that conversation and see what the current interest levels are, making sure that those both even available still and or where the property owners are.
Sure, you just are gonna have to get all of that information for really make a decision.
Right.
You know, if one of them's gonna be $1.5 million, the other's 300,000. You do a lot of site work difference.
Sure.
Yeah, Tony here. To that point, and further on from Phil's question earlier, looking at these two floor plans and talking about the type of construction, you've got about an 8,000 square foot footprint here. You know, the basement's a little smaller, the upper level is a little larger. But in that footprint, in this sloping site, this would lend itself to post-up type construction. Lower level is gonna be a lot more concrete. We might have some steel columns in it. Your upper floor may actually be a slab on deck, so raising up off of that, and then you build a wood frame on top of the slab, and then, you know, a smaller roof line, it lends itself to trusses. So you're gonna get into some different types of construction. And when we say, you know, it's about 1,000 square foot difference, adding stair and elevator, those are not cheap square footages. So you're adding about 1,000 square feet of total building, but you're also adding typically a steel set of stairs, poured risers, poured treads on those stairs. Elevators are an expensive item given the square footage. So the cost model on this layout is going to be much different than just 1,000 square feet at X dollars. So there's some complexity, and that's without getting into the site work. But just to Phil's question before he got there, I wanted to fill people in on the type of construction that this would take, different than slab on grade, stick built, throw some trusses up. You can move really quickly in that type of construction. And construction on this site, lay down logistics, this type of operation on a constricted site is going to add cost and complexity.
I think another consideration with this site as well is visual from Main Street. We have a big parking lot, give or take the level of Main Street. You're driving down Main Street, you're looking at the police department, you're seeing the roof. You're not seeing the facade of the building. You're not seeing that it's really a police. It's gonna take a lot more signage, et cetera, to really show that it is a police department as compared to Newport Road, which is gonna be a visible statement that it is.
Yeah, it's hard to tell on the image, on the upper image, which is from Main Street, because the parking lot is higher, but when you look at the lower image, right, John, which is from the backside, you just see the difference in height. And with about an 8-foot difference potentially between Main Street and first floor of the build, the main level of the building, the upper level, you're gonna be somewhere like at the height of this, maybe the top of the windows here or something like that, right? So you're gonna see the police department, but you're not gonna see the ground level of it because you'd be anywhere from 7 to 8 feet above it, right? Are you guys with me? So that's right. I said it's hard to see here in the upper image, even though if you look carefully, it is that way. I know there's no ramp, we get that. But you can definitely see it in the lower image. You can see that slope. So
Yeah, so just to talk about elevation changes from the road to the main entrance, we have 8 feet there. From the main entrance to the back of the building, we're dropping in another 12 to 14 feet just because of floor to floor heights, and again, that's working with the grade, but there's, again, we would have sidewalks where we can, ramps where we need them. It's gonna be a different perspective from Main Street, other than from Newport, because Newport, you're eye level to the building, this one, you're looking down. But just looking at some of the massing, similar to what we did on Newport, we're sticking within, you know, the neighborhood, using a gable form roof. You know, trying to, you know, maximize solar orientation. Having a main entrance from Main Street so that visitors can understand what the building is, where to go. The back of the building, we tried to simplify it as much as possible. That flat section in the back would house potentially mechanical units so that we could hide them. So again, we're trying to think of these things, try to spend our money where we can or where we need, and go from there.
Is there anything we can talk to about it? If we're in, we've got a lot of neighbors in this property. Is there any concern, or do we care?
We're working all with setbacks, but again, being a good neighbor, obviously you want to notify them. But property wise, we're working all with them.
I mean, the height limitations, floor area ratio, FARs, setbacks, we're all within all of that. So there's nothing that we're doing or proposing here that would trigger, you know, unless we didn't, I can't remember about zoning or not, but that's maybe the only thing I don't remember.
The only thing that you want to be focusing on is the building within the setback. Currently right now it's not. So again, that's a check for the good.
Yeah, I was thinking just as a
Courtesy,
Yep.
sure.
The current site is posing some difficulties already with the house right next door. So this is in the middle of a bunch of residential houses on this site.
Disgruntled. We're also coming to an.
We're buying his house.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah,
Those same neighbors may vote no on this and yes on Newport Road, right? You know, so you do want to be a good neighbor. We would have to go eventually through site plan approval. Recently, I have been involved in a project where the citizens just didn't want a public safety facility in a certain location, so they voted against procurement of that site. They voted positively for the $11 million for the public safety building, but they shut down the site, and we had to go find a new site. The project went forward, but in a different location.
so just to wrap up our presentation, I think John, our recommendation and it's up to Colliers and the town and is that the Newport site seems to be very advantageous. Our recommendation would be so we can move forward and not just come to standstill, but it's up to you folks, is to have that, I will do each side of the time. To do Newport, we'll share that with VHB, get any other input from VHB, John, you know, our civil engineers. If there's anything else we're not thinking about that maybe may impact, they've already given us the the constraints map, as we call it, right, John, because of setbacks and utilities, but just to be safe. And then to develop that to a space plan level, and a little bit more developed exterior imaging. On the Main Street side, we suggest having VHB look at it. They're gonna basically delineate possible locations of things like retaining walls, check driveway grades to make sure it's not a black diamond ski slope, you know, and also we'll show things like ramp into the building, which we totally aware it needs to happen, but not to develop that any further than the block plan. That, if you ask for our recommendation to be good, you know, managers of your money and time, that's what we recommend doing. That would enable us 2 weeks from now to have a space plan and a better developed image of the Newport site and have all the information available for Tony, at least site-wise, you know, for the Main Street site. That's our recommendation, but it's up, we serve at your pleasure, so. But that keeps the ball moving forward.
Thank you, Bob. Any additional questions from our committee?
Yes, a couple of thoughts. Maybe this is more for Adam. But if any private entity came into Main Street into London and said, I want to build a building and I'm going to stick a parking lot in front of it, they would bodily throw them out of the room. We have a portion of the town which is a bunch of parking lots with buildings behind that. That's not Main Street. So I'm just asking whether we've turned a bias toward keeping the building on Main Street rather than, for instance, Parkside, into something that is never going to fly, and the thumb again sits on the scale. The other question I had was reflecting back on 2 or 3 meetings ago, there was a discussion about when we're going to get to wants versus needs, because much of this seems to flow around the large visitors parking lot, which is tied directly to the provision of another community. So the visitors need shrinks to a fingernail size area without that community room. And I'm just wondering, before we charge all the way down this road, when some of those discussions are going to happen.
Phil, from the perspective of the parking on the street, you're 100% correct. The site plan review regulations request that parking be to the side or to the rear. It does allow for waivers to be granted when that's not possible. My guess is that it's not possible, or they wouldn't have presented a difference
You
here.
can rotate it maybe or something, but there's ways to skin that cat. But that community room is not just a community room. It's really primarily a training facility, correct? I mean, Chief should speak to that. So
just want to finish to Phil's point, but that is my largest reservation with this design is the parking in the front. The planning board has worked hard to encourage developers to remove things, and we're very excited to be losing the second to last parking lot that backs out into Main Street in short time here. So that would be a disadvantage in my opinion.
As to the visitor parking in the community room, I guess I would offer that I think it is a need for the police department to have for the longevity of this building. Which is why when we discussed it in the space needs analysis conversation that we have and that was approved, there were reasons that we articulated that is a need, I think, for the police department moving forward.
Have you checked with the water district to make sure you can connect? You might want to do that because just do that.
Yes.
Can you give me a little more on that?
let's put it this way, this building has a lot less water use than 80 apartments, but 60 apartments, sorry.
I can't tell if anybody is talking or not.
We were just discussing that we would be in the precinct.
Okay.
Would be a conversation that we have to about.
Yep.
And provide water, and then Bob offered that it's a much less water usage than.
Oh, yeah.
Very much so, yes. Okay, so I think where we're at now, I know that Bob, you made it clear that it would be nice to have some sort of directive as to whether we still look at both properties or just focus on one for the next meeting, so you guys can put together what you need to put together for the next meeting. But just given that, we did get these yesterday, we've now had conversations. I would love to, I can only see 6 people here, but just get a sense from our committee members if they feel like they want more time to digest everything and come back at the next meeting with the decision, or if we feel like we're in a place to say, yes, move forward with one location over the other. And Jim, I might rely on you just to look around the room.
I didn't say that. Actually, I'm sorry, I didn't really actually say that. What I said is that we can develop Newport further, but provide the site information
Okay.
to the committee and to Tony. Okay, just want to make sure, because yeah.
Actually, looking around the room, it looks like the majority would like to make a vote or make a recommendation on one site today, correct? Susan? I think that's what we're gonna go with today, actually.
All right, let's do it. So, do we have, how do we want to do this? Do we want to vote on Newport Road and go around the room? To move
I'd
forward?
like to do a show of hands, which site we'd like to move forward with, so the Valley can get us going on this project.
Perfect.
I'll just go on the record that I disagree with funneling this down to one site.
Okay, majority. We have a vote, Newport Road, show of hands. I have 7 for Newport Road. Bill's obviously against that.
Okay.
Ashley, your recommendation?
My recommendation is Newport Road, as well. Main Street makes me a little nervous.
Okay, I guess we're gonna move forward with that recommendation.
Wonderful.
But do we still want?
Do we
the
still want?
Valley Do we still want the Valley to go ahead and show us a little more detail? The next meeting on Main Street, so we have that piece of information.
Yeah.
Ashley, Tony here. Yes, I would recommend that we still do that. I'm still gonna
Perfect.
price on the exercise. One, I owe it to you, so we should do that. We always want to be able to answer the question, why not? Why
Yep.
didn't we do something? What did we look at? What were those drivers that led us to the decision? We've talked about it, and you're comfortable with moving forward with greater detail on Newport Road. That's fine. We still need to kind of backload the how we got there. So
Great.
I've been taking notes on all your questions as we go along. I will either carry those as exclusions or inclusions with additional costs on them, so that when somebody a week, a year, a month from now pulls out that document, why did they do this?
Yep.
Oh, the Main Street site had these constraints, these cost riders to it, and it gives you something to speak to in the future.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Tony.
Yes.
Okay, so I think that's what we will work towards for our next meeting in 2 weeks. Greater detail on Newport Road, additional info on the Main Street property. And I just encourage the committee members. I know this is a lot to take in, and I'm, if you're anything like me, I'll continue to think about this for the next 2 weeks and have questions. Feel free to send those over, and we'll get those over to Colliers and LaValle, Brenzinger, so that we can come to the next meeting with those questions addressed as well. Is there anything that I am missing? I know that we are just about at 10 o'clock. Anything else from our committee members or our partners who are here? All right.
Just one question.
Yeah.
I believe last meeting afterwards, you were going to go look at the Sigma data, the old Sigma data building. The what do they call it now? The Broom building. And I'm just curious what the purpose of that was. Is that to
look at possibly buying it and renovating it. And
I think it was, because that property had been on the table at some point in the past, so. Probably take a look at it and see if it was still, possibility. Architect or an engineer, but just from what I see it.
okay, thank you.
All right, we will get these up on the website, so our community members who are with us, feel free to review, send in your questions. We'll get those answered as well. But otherwise, I think we're good, and we'll see each other in 2 weeks.
Thank you. Have fun.
Thank you, Ashley.
All right, bye, guys.